Greetings, one and all. I'm reminded again that we need to treat others correctly. You know, last week we finished Philippians chapter 1, talking about how we treat others. And I'm reminded of the fact that Paul didn't put chapter breaks in this book or any of his writings. Chapter breaks weren't added in the Bible until 1236 AD. And certainly Paul never intended for chapter 1 and chapter 2 to be read separately. How do we treat others? Well, you know, I did a funeral just recently, and now today I find out another person I know has passed away. Too young, both of them. But we never know what the last words we'll say to somebody are. We'll never know what the last words we say to somebody will mean to them. How we treat others is so very important. And Philippians 2, 1 through 11 is the heart of my ministry, of my life. These verses, I can't even begin to describe how they make me feel. But I'm going to try. Philippians 2, let's see if we can get through verse 5 tonight. I'm not sure we will. You know, Philippians 2, 1 through 4 are very much the heart of what Paul was talking about last week. I'm going to be reading from the New International Version.
Cindy says hi, Mom says hi.
Well, hi. I'm going to be reading from the New International Version, and I know tonight a couple of times at least twice, maybe 3 times, I'm going to revert to the New Living Translation, at least just for an example that I think better expresses what Paul's saying than the NIV does. So, did you want this?
Just
Hey. So Philippians 2, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of the others. There is so much packed in there. And I apologize if I stuttered a little. You know, I've got this memorized in the New American Standard, and the NIV gets a little awkward. You know, when you memorize something in one translation, and then in another translation, and then you're trying to read it from a third translation. But anyway. So here in Philippians 2, 1 through 4, Paul asks us a whole sequence of rhetorical questions. These are good questions for a Christian to ask themselves about the truth in their life. If you don't know what rhetorical questions are, it means I ask you a question and I don't expect you to give an answer. Rhetorical questions are often used by public speakers to make somebody think. And I think that that's what Paul thought he was doing, was making his readers think. Do you think you followed me? Is there any encouragement from being a Christian? Well, every Christian's going to say, of course there is. You know what I'm saying? Of course there is. Are you comforted by his love? Well, sure I am. These are the answers Paul expects you to give. Do you have any fellowship with other Christians? Yes. Is your heart tender and compassionate? Again, these are rhetorical questions. Paul doesn't expect the answer because the answer is obvious in the question. And I'm going to challenge you to ask, is that really true? Is the answer you want to give, that you think Paul wants you to give, that you know God wants you to give, is that answer really true in your life? Are you encouraged from being a Christian? I mean, is that truly encouraging? If not, there are one of two statements is probably true about you. I mean, is being a Christian something that when you get down, you just think about how wonderful it is to be a Christian? And you can keep on going just with that thought. I mean, I know we all have times of struggle and difficulty. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the struggles that go on for days and weeks and months. And for some of us, for years. When you are in these hard times, is the thought that I'm a Christian, is that enough to encourage you? If not, one of two things is probably true. Either you aren't truly a Christian. I mean, dedicated to God, body, soul, and spirit Christian. 100% all in Christian. Or the people around you are not truly Christian in that sense of the word. Because there is great encouragement from being a Christian. Many people experience it. It has to be true for you yourself, and it has to be true for those around you. Because without the other Christians around you, it's awful hard to stand all alone. Yeah, even with God's help, it's awful hard to stand alone. Like the story that I like to quote says about the little boy who was afraid of the thunderstorm. His mama said, "Don't worry, Jesus is with you." He said, "But I want somebody with flesh and bones that can hold my hand." We all need that flesh and bone. Are you comforted by his love? Are you comforted by his love? If you aren't, if you don't feel that warmth of his love, you know, the warmth that just, you know, it's like when a loving father grabs a hold of you after you've been gone for a long time. To a kid, it might be an hour. To an adult, it might be a few years. And your loving father grabs his hold of you and wraps his arms around you and just gives you a big hug. And I don't mean a 2-second hug. Are you comforted by his love like that? If not, I would challenge you to reevaluate your relationship to God. He provides that comfort. Paul asked, do you have fellowship with other Christians? Now, he's not talking about, yep, I do. I go to church every Sunday and I have fellowship. I don't think that's what he means. I think Paul, if he was sitting here right now would look me in the face. He'd point his finger right in my face, and he'd say, "Velcro, do you ever go fishing with somebody?" "Well, no, Paul, I don't like fishing." "Well, Velcro, do you ever go camping with somebody?" "Well, no, Paul, I don't like camping." "Velcro, do you ever go riding your stupid motorcycle with people?" "Oh, Paul, I love to do that." That's fellowship. What's fellowship to me is different than what's fellowship to you. At Iron Horse Community Church, we love fellowship. I know we love fellowship because when we do a barbecue or a potluck or just whatever, even for pity's sake, just on a normal Sunday, it's hard to get the people to shut up and start our church service, or get them to shut up and go home because I'm tired. We love fellowshipping with each other. I mean, we love it. We love just being together. And it's not just on Sunday. We love getting together during the week. Now, some of us are better at it than others. Yeah, I'm the gabby one that hooks up with everyone every time possible, but it takes two. They have to want to spend time with me. You know what I'm saying? Do you have fellowship with others? In the NIV, that Paul calls that common sharing in the Spirit. If you don't have that kind of fellowship, then I would challenge you that you need to re-examine your relationship with your brothers and sisters in Christ. Because going to church on Sunday is not fellowship. Well, it is. But that's kind of like pathetic fellowship. That's like calling a lawnmower a motorized vehicle. Sure it is. I challenge you to go ahead and take it out on the interstate and run 1,000 miles in one day. Is your heart tender and compassionate?
Is that even possible to run 1,000 miles on a day?
Well, in a car, I did over 1,500 miles in a day more than once. One time I hit 1,800. On a motorcycle, I have done as many as 1,400 miles in a 20-hour ride. I was much younger then. On a lawnmower, I don't think I've ever even tried to think about doing 1,000 miles in a day. I was hyperbole, I was exaggerating, but you get the point. So is your heart tender and compassionate? Of course, we all want to say yes, because that's what Christians are supposed to be. That's what Jesus talked about. But instead of saying yes, why don't you think about it this way? Would your family call you tender and compassionate? Oh, don't just tell me yes. I've done enough family counseling to know that even good Christian families, and I'm not saying that sarcastically, I'm saying that really, but good Christian families sometimes don't treat each other with tenderness and compassion. What about your coworkers? Do your coworkers say, "Well, she's really tender and compassionate to everyone around her"? Or do they say, "Yeah, I don't want to be around him on a bad day"? You ever know somebody? "Hey, when I'm feeling down, I want to go talk to this person." That's because they're tender and compassionate. How about to the clerks in the store? You get up to the cash register, and sometimes you just know somebody's been having a lousy, horrible, rotten, no good, terrible day. And they are perhaps a little, shall we say, brusque. Or maybe that's just their personality. Are you tender and compassionate with them? How about Go back to one of my favorites, servers in restaurants, bus boys in restaurants, or bus ladies. I wouldn't call them girls. I'll call the guys boys, I don't care. Respect to the ladies. It's the way my parents raised me, and I try and be obedient. The servers, the bus people. How many times do you say to a bus person, hey, thank you for, maybe they're at the other table. Usually that's the way it is. Hey, sure appreciate you doing all that. You know, you make life much easier for us when you are here to clean up these nasty tables. That's tenderness and compassion. When your server is perhaps a little off on their day, are you tender and compassionate, or do you just say, well, they didn't give me very good service, they're going to get a $2 tip today. That'll teach them. Dear Christians, a tender and compassionate person would say, wow, they're really having a bad day. Let's see. Our total bill was $22. So 20% would be $2. And no, excuse me, that's 10%. It'd be $4.40. So I'm going to give them a $5. No, they're really having a bad day. I'm going to give them $8. That's 40% almost. That's a tender and compassionate person who's trying to turn around the day that somebody else is having if they're not having a good day. And if you go to the same restaurant, very often you get to know which servers are just naturally surly. And let me tell you, those people don't usually last long in a restaurant because they don't get good tips. Why not be tender and compassionate? If they're having a rough day, do something to cheer them up. I teach people all the time, bus your own plates. Gather everything, the straw wrapper, put it on your plate. Stack it all up, even if you're not OCD. Just stack it up there. They don't care how it's stacked. Make it so they just have to pick up one plate and leave for each person. What's that?
Makes their job easier.
Oh, it makes their job so much easier. And then leave them a big tip.
And then next time you come in, everybody wants to be.
and the next time you come in, you know, they talk to each other. You may say, oh, they're never going to tell anybody else I treated them right. You're wrong. It's human nature. And next time you come in, everyone's going to want to serve you because you have a tender and compassionate heart. That's what Paul's talking about here. I really love the New Living Translation in verse 2. He says, then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and one purpose. And he's talking to Christians. Paul's telling the Philippians that if they are truly Christians, by the standards of these first 4 verses, then he wants them to make him truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and purpose. That should be our goal as Christians today. Unfortunately, we tend to bicker with each other, usually over insignificant differences. And I'm not just talking about doctrinal differences. We were talking this morning about a church where the associate pastor told one man he really didn't want him coming to the church because the man wore his Stetson during service. Well, I get it. In most American churches, they want the men to take their hats off when they walk into the church. Why? Well, I'll challenge you to go research it, but I'm going to give you a hint. This started long after the time of Christ. Because in the time of Christ, if men wore anything on their head, it was when they were out in the desert, in the wilderness, trying to protect themselves from the sun. When they were in town, very few cultures in that day did men wear anything on their head. Don't look to the Bible for the answer to this one. Look to your own history. It comes about from the days of the kings in the Middle Ages. When men that went into the presence of the king were expected to take their hat off. Even the king's closest friends, although they might, in some countries, have been allowed to put their hat back on after they first took it off and bowed. But usually, even then, they didn't put it back on. And it all comes from that. We have these man-made rules. And somebody says, well, I'm going to wear my hat indoors because of whatever. I shared with a couple of people a story of a man I knew that wore a baseball cap through church, and a lot of people got very upset, and this was a very large church. I happened to know the young man. He was in his 20s. I say young. I was 36 when I got to that church. He was younger than me by 6 or 8, 10 years. He had started going bald when he was in grade school, and kids mocked and teased him, so he started wearing a baseball cap. He wore that even when he was sitting in the living room with his wife. Or she might have been in the kitchen, he was in the living room with his children. He had 2 little toddlers. And he still wears baseball cap at home because he was so accustomed to it. And people wanted to criticize him. The pastor said with a smile, I was there. He said with a smile, when you can tell me why he's wearing that cap in church, then we can talk. Until then, leave. Go away and let him wear his cap. That man told almost nobody why he wore his cap. But it had become a real issue for him personally. And we so quickly judge others. I'm going to talk about these verses far too long. Paul says, make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other. When Paul says that, well, I'm going to come back to that whole thought as we go through verses 3 and 4. Paul says that believers should do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. You know, John, I'm reading the NIV and it almost feels like I'm reading a King James here. Do we even know what do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit means? Let me give you
I'd have a hard time explaining it.
Let me give you the short version of that. It's not about you. It's not about you, and it's not about me. John, it's not about you.
Thank God.
Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Look at what he says next. In humility, value others better than yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. Still very awkward in the NIV. Is Paul really saying that what we want and need is less important than the wants and needs of others? Yep. Any more questions? This is what Jesus taught us. This is what love is. Putting somebody else's needs first. You can't say, again, I'll go back to the dating rituals. You can't tell someone, I love you, and then never do anything for them because they are not going to believe your words. They're going to believe your actions. I love you, but I want to go here even though you hate it. I love you, but I want to do this even though you hate it. That is not love. You put the wants and needs of others ahead of your own wants and needs. In 1 Corinthians 13, we call it the love chapter. Do you know what's around the love chapter? Paul's talking about the spiritual gifts. And one of them that some groups love to talk about is speaking in tongues. And they might want to talk about prophesying or interpreting. And Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, if you don't have love, you're just making a bunch of noise. Paraphrase according to Pastor Velcro, he calls you a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal or something like that, depending on the translation. That's what 1 Corinthians 13 is talking about. When Jesus was talking about this, he said, love one another. When Jesus was talking about this, he said, love your neighbor as yourself. When Jesus was talking about this, somebody asked, who's your neighbor? And he told the story of the Good Samaritan who helped a Jew. And those two people groups were opposed. In sign language, this means fighting each other. That's two people fighting. You can see the visualization. When Paul says, put others first, when Paul says love one another, when Jesus says love one another, I want you to think golden rule. Now go apply it in your daily life with each person you meet. And remember, the golden rule is do to others as you would want them to do to you. Not do to others as they have done to you. Not do to others before they do to you. And we crack jokes about that. But get serious about this. It's do to others what you want them to do to you. In the New Living Translation, I'm going to read verses 3 and 4, and then I'm going to talk about them some more. I'm going to go just a hair long today. We'll get through verse 4. And that's it. Oh, John, how many times have I criticized churches for only doing one verse or one word in a Bible study, and here I go. There is so much packed in this book. New Living Translation, verses 3 and 4. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. And that I understand better than the NIV. If you want specifics, Paul gave them to you right here. I want you to evaluate yourself, honestly. I challenge you to go back and listen to this again and take a few notes. Paul says, don't be selfish. But that's human nature. I mean, we all think about ourselves. Paul says, don't. He says, don't try to impress others. Do those two go together? Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. I think maybe they do go together. Sometimes when we aren't selfish, we're trying to impress others. We question our motives all the time. Or at least many of us do. But this is what Paul's talking about in this whole section. Especially verses 1 through 4, but you're going to see 5 through 11, it's the same thing. And if you go back to chapter 1, the last half of it, this is the same stuff he was talking about there. Selfish people try to impress others because it makes them look good. Because it makes them feel like they're, oh, so righteous. Because it draws attention to themselves. Oh, look at me, I'm not selfish. I'm busy impressing others. They're the same words, aren't they? Selfish, impressing others. Yeah. One of the challenges I've often issued over the years is, I'd like to say 10 times a day, but just once a day. Just once a day. Can I revert to my childhood? I double dog dare you to once a day do something for someone that they don't know you did it, and you don't tell them or anyone else that you did it. That's the hard part. And nobody else knows you did it. They never saw you. If you start trying to do that, it will become easy to do it multiple times a day. Don't try to impress others. Because when we're trying to impress others, you know what we aren't doing? We aren't thinking about what they want or need in their lives. If we do things the right way, for the right reasons, people will be impressed. No, they won't know every time we do it. Don't care. God knows. But the important thing is if we do everything for the right reasons, in the right way, without trying to impress other people, people will be impressed. And I'm going to tell you, usually if you're trying to do something to impress somebody, it tends to backfire. Sometimes you look rather bit like a fool. Paul says, be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Please notice that Paul doesn't say, if they truly are better. Yeah. For some of us, that would be hard to find anyone that's better than us, at least in our own opinion. But not all of us. And probably not the people listening right now, because otherwise, if you were that self-righteous, you probably wouldn't be bothering with me. The point here is our attitude. Paul wants us to put others in first place. Paul's theme in this book is joy. There's an old children's song that spells joy. Jesus and others and you. J-O-Y. Jesus and others and you. And that's should be our priorities. Hey, Mom, I learned that song when I was just a wee little lad. I still remember it. My mom was teaching Sunday school classes back then. Joy. Joy comes from our attitudes. Paul says, don't look at only your own interests, but also at the interests of others. Think about others. You know, it's like at Christmas time. What's the greatest joy? Getting a present from somebody you love, or watching somebody you love open a present you bought them? And yes, unless you're a total egomaniac, it's watching somebody else open a present that you've carefully chosen. If you love somebody and you've thought long and hard and you've struggled to find the right present, you find it and they open it and they go, wow. Now, there's joy. Oh, in them too, probably. But we feel the joy when we see that. Just loving others can be a very passive statement. How many Christians say, oh, I love others? Taking an interest in others is what Paul's talking about here, and that's an active verb, not passive. Again, if you're trying to date somebody romantically and win them over to become your lifetime companion, you aren't passively saying, I love you. You're actively going out of your way to show them that you love them. That's what Paul's talking about here. That's what Jesus is talking about when he says love one another. We're supposed to love people in that kind of manner. How far do we take this concept of putting others first? I don't know. Where's the limit? One that I do all the time, I eat out a lot, far too often in my lifetime.
Where's the limit?
And eating out, it really doesn't mean much to me. What means something to me is the people I'm with. So, hey, where do you want to go? Let them choose a restaurant. When I'm doing marriage counseling, I tell couples that when it's their time to pick a restaurant, they should pick their spouse's favorite restaurant. Well, my spouse never chooses a restaurant. Fine. Pick their favorite restaurant every time. If they don't like it, then tell them, okay, then you pick another one. And then what should they do? They should pick your favorite restaurant. You hear what I'm saying? It's a two-way street, people. Should we put the interests, wants, and needs of others ahead of our own when we are driving? Boy, I got a whole lesson. I got an hour-long lesson I've taught in 5, 6 different states on how to drive according to the Bible. There, I just said it in one sentence. Consider others when we are driving. You don't know what's going on in their life. Maybe they're driving like an idiot because of extreme emotional trauma in their life. Maybe they just got to hurry and get to the bathroom. Who knows? Bless them. Bless them.
Bless you. Bless you a lot.
And we can probably think of many more examples. Perhaps the question we should be asking, John just said a little bit ago, when do we not put the wants and needs and desires and interests of somebody else ahead of our own? When do we not? I target 30 minutes, and it looks like I'd like to do about 5 more. It'll be 40 minutes. Please don't be mad at me. I want to finish verse 4. You know, one of the things, I know somebody that goes to a church very close to me, and a wonderful couple. He's got a really nice pickup. She's got a really nice minivan. Even though their kids are grown, she's got the grandkids sometimes. And they've got a nice speedboat, John. Oh, it's nice. And their RV cost double what this house cost. He's made good money. A few years ago, they went out and bought matching MG3s. Is that the right car? A little sports car, 2-seater? Is that an MG3? Or maybe it was a BMW 3? I don't know. They were really nice. Custom paint jobs, identical. License plates, 1 number apart. Really nice. And sure, if you've worked hard and you've made a lot of money, you know, sometimes that means you were blessed with a better head start than others. Sometimes not. I've been to their house. It's definitely enormous. I've never pointed out to John which one it is, but he drives right by it 2-3 times a week. And it's easily worth probably $1 million or more. And it's just the two of them living there. Mansion, huge, enormous. Wonderful people. But you know, in that church, it's one of the bigger churches in town. They have people going to that church that sometimes haven't eaten for a day or 2 when they get to church. They've got people going to that church where one couple I knew, they are no longer living in Cheyenne, but they went to that church and they could barely make ends meet. They were both working 2 part-time jobs and they had 2 kids. And between daycare and everything else, with 2 part-time jobs that probably paid no more than $10 a piece, they were making maybe $1,000, maybe $1,000 a month, maybe, I don't know, $1,400. And their car broke down. They had 1 car between them. It wasn't a nice car. You know, wouldn't it been nice if this couple, who probably never even met this young couple, wouldn't it have been nice if this couple had just gone out and paid $2,000 and given them a car? Wouldn't have even dented their budget. Or what if the next time they went to buy a new minivan, they just said, let's drive this one for another year. Nah, instead of trading in, let's give it to this couple. Shouldn't that be what Christians are looking for the opportunity
That's what they
to
did
do?
in Acts.
Oh, that's what they did in Acts. They sold everything they had and brought it to the apostles and laid it at their feet and said, here, use this to feed people. It angers me when I find people that are going to church and they don't even have enough food to eat. And yes, we do try and do something about it. People give us sofas, good shape. Refrigerators, stoves. We got a big upright freezer a couple of years ago. I thought we were going to take our little tiny chest one and take it downstairs for me and Mama. Chris said, no, I got somebody else that needs it. Oops, there went my freezer. People, I'm not preaching something that I'm going to practice. I'm preaching what I already practice and have for years because I had somebody teach me. You know, the funny thing is, well, not this one isn't funny. I just thought of it. You know, there's a man in this town that recently quit the ministry just a year or two ago. And a few years back, he confided in a small group of other pastors that sometimes he got jealous of people in his church because they had expensive houses and expensive cars, and he could barely provide for his family. Church members going on cruises in the Bahamas, and he said, I got jealous. And he said, sometimes it hurts because I know I'm not supposed to be jealous. Fast forward, and a few years later, he quit the ministry. He could not deal with it anymore. The funny thing is that the people with less money are usually the ones that are donating things to us to give away. I have never had a rich person come up to me and say, here's $5,000 for your ministry. If I put something on Facebook and say, I've got somebody with a broken down car, I very seldom have a rich person come and say, well, wait, I've never had a rich person come and say, well, here's the keys to my car, why don't you just give it to them? We had somebody recently that has 2 cars that barely run, give away their third one that didn't run anymore. Well, it sort of did. And then it broke down. They gave it to somebody. They didn't have much. Am I talking about giving to a homeless beggar on the street? You know, I worked with a homeless shelter for 1 year, and I visited others, and I can tell you that most of those people are living that lifestyle by their own choice. But you know, sometimes they aren't. How do we know the difference? Well, you have to get to know them. Stop, get out of your car, go over and give them a hug, and offer to take them to McDonald's. If they say, we'll work for food, offer to take them home to mow your yard. Feed them a good meal and then give them a $100 bill and say, God bless you. If they say, we'll work for food, offer to take them to McDonald's or Denny's. If they don't want to go, don't give them any money. We'll work for food is a lie for some people. That's what we're talking about. Getting to know people, love people, put their wants and needs. Help somebody have confidence in themselves. You know, earlier I said this man might have had a good start. I'm not saying he did. Might have had wealthy parents. He inherited money. I'm not saying he did. He might have had parents who could pay for him to get a good education. I'm not saying he did. I know his story. It doesn't matter. But you know, some people don't ever get those opportunities. Some people never get those opportunities. Their parents don't even encourage them to go to grade school. If they skip school, nobody cares. They get poor grades, nobody cares. Nobody's motivating them to do better for themselves. So I have programs like the Boys and Girls Club where they want mentors. It's a good thing to do, to encourage a young person to do better. But you know, they don't have to be teenagers. They can be 20-somethings and 30-somethings. We've got a man that's a 30-something that just came into our lives recently, and he wants to turn his life around, and he wants to do better. You know, we can help others. That's what Paul's talking about, as far as I can tell. Sometimes it's just helping them get confidence in themselves. Sometimes it's getting them to learn how to manage money. Isn't that how we'd like to be treated? I'm going to finish with 2 more verses. Way too long, but I apologize. It's just so important to me. James 2:16, the brother of Jesus writes, if one of you who says to someone who has no food and no clothes, warm clothes, whatever, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? John the Apostle in 1 John 3:17 and 18, he says, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother and sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. If you think I've been too harsh, ask God what he thinks. Read the scriptures again. I pray that God will help you understand the truth of these passages. I challenge you to see if what I have said matches up with the scripture. I love you. Thank you. Bye.